Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second chapter for the course Investment Portfolio Management and Capital Market. For some of you, especially those who took FM1 under my class, for sure, this chapter would be very much familiar to you. So, parang review na lang ito, no? But the twist here is we're going to connect or we're going to incorporate investment portfolio management with the application of the models or the equations that we used, especially in terms of computing for the standard deviation. How do we actually practice the use of standard deviation with investments? And so, since we have so much knowledge about the different investment options and alternatives, this time mas ma-appreciate natin itong topic ng risk and return. Okay. So this is going to be a very challenging chapter in a sense na napakaraming kailangang i-memorize. Yes, we're going to memorize formulas, we're going to memorize terminologies, but most importantly, we have to understand the concept of these terminologies that we're going to encounter for this chapter. But before that, let me share with you this quote by the very famous Albert Einstein. He said, "Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." Sa madaling salita, for those people who truly understands the concept of interest, sila talaga yung nakaka-maximize ng benefit. And on the other hand, those who cannot understand the power of interest rate, sila most of the time yung nagbabayad. Sino yung mga yan? Yung mga nangungutang. So, yung mga nakakaintindi, sila yung mga investors. At yung mga hindi, sila madalas yung palaging short of cash. So, therefore, sila yung palaging suki ng mga nagpapautang. So, ganun kahalaga yung konsepto ng interest. Kasi pag sinabi nating risk and return, isa lang ang dapat pumasok sa isip nyo, no? It's really about interest rates. In chapter 1, I kept mentioning the financial management principle number 1, which is the risk-return trade-off. It's really the principle that summarizes what interest rates, what risk-taking is all about. That people will not generally take extra risk if they do not expect extra return to compensate that additional risk. And so, technically, when we say risk and return and why it resonates the word interest rates would be the measurement of how much a person, it's like a window. It's how you would see a particular investment from the outside without even further investigation. You would know how risky an asset or an investment is just by looking at the level of interest rate this investment has. Okay, and so as you can see in this graphical presentation, the y-axis means the potential return. So, hindi sinabi ng presentation that it's the actual return, but it's the potential return, just to give you an idea of how our curve is progressing as the expected risk, or as presented in the x-axis, is increasing as the level of risk is increasing. As you can see right here, there is the word defensive assets and there is the word growth assets. Okay? When we say defensive assets, in times of crisis, these are the reliable source of income that would shield you from losses. And the growth assets would be the highest sources of losses, and also at the same time the highest sources of growth in times of when the economy is doing well. So it's both huge sources of gains and huge sources of losses, because you know that the higher the risk, the higher the return, and so the higher the losses, the higher the gains as well. That's why the lowest form of security, not investment, the lowest kind of security is really cash or other equivalent to cash. So lower return and lower risk. Okay, that's why it's part of the defensive asset. It's important that you have a stable source of cash. Next would be the fixed interest rate. Okay, now the fixed interest rate is still included in the defensive asset, because we know that fixed interest securities are very much safe as compared to other long-term or capital market securities or alternative market securities. So here, after this shaded area here, alam na natin that this would be as we progress with our table right here, no, yung expected risk natin, yung return at yung risk tumataas, and so property shares and other alternative investment would be considered as growth assets. So meaning they can give you more potential gains or returns in the future. So if we're going to define interest rates, this is actually the cost of money, or in economics, we call it the opportunity cost of money. Because ang tinitrade mo kasi with interest rates is what we call yung delayed gratification. Okay? If you're well aware of what delayed gratification is, it's like trading something in return of something. Yun ang ibig sabihin kasi ng opportunity cost eh. You're sacrificing something today because you are expecting a return out of that sacrifice. And so, you have a choice. You have a choice of spending your money right now, but because of delayed gratification, you know that there is a bigger opportunity if you do not spend your money right now. And so interest rates is that mechanism that fulfills that delayed gratification. So interest rate is defined as the return loss from not investing in a comparable risk investment. Like for example, if you put your money in a plain savings account, and we know that a plain savings account would only give you at least 0.75% per annum. That's an average. The maximum would probably 1.25%, and that is siguro sa Citibank, no, if you're aware of what Citibank is. So maximum na sabihin na natin is 0.75. But if you put your money in a time deposit, so mas higher level of deposit na to, no, kasi mas longer yung period. If you're gonna put your money in a time deposit account, you're gonna earn bigger as compared to that 0.75%. So you have a choice. It's either you put your money in a savings account or you put your money in a time deposit. If you put your money in a savings account, you can withdraw that money anytime. But if you put your money in a time deposit, it's gonna earn approximately 3 to 4%, which is napakalayo ng diferensya as compared to the 0.75%. And so there is a return from that choice. Ang sinulat dito is lost from not investing in a comparable risk investment. And so we have now a defining it's like a character, no? Ibig sabihin parang meron kang basis. There is a defining basis of what differentiates one investment to another investment. Although same sila na deposit, But because time deposit is restricted from withdrawals, mas mataas yung kanyang restriction. So therefore, mas mataas din yung kanyang interest rate. And also, it is expected to compensate the investor for the time, inflation, and risk. Just like with bonds, ito, mas higher risk na to as compared to time deposit. Sa time deposit kasi pwedeng 1 year lang or di kaya naman 2 years. O di kaya naman 190 days. So, it depends on the dun sa period. But for bonds, you know that the minimum time would be 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. And who knows kung meron pang 10 years or 20 years na meron talaga. But the point is, as your investment is exposed to a longer period of time, it is also exposed to volatility of inflation and other form of risks, whether it be systematic or unsystematic risk. So with that, having in mind, you know that the more your investment is exposed to all of these elements, the higher the interest rates that you should be demanding from your investment. So, yun ang ibig sabihin at yun ang definition ng interest rates. I'm sure you've heard of the term inflation rate so many times. Sa news, probably sa economics class ninyo, you've read it somewhere sa newspaper, you've heard it from the radio, but I know you know inflation rate by its definition of it determines the purchasing power of the currency, or in our case it's the purchasing power of peso. And basta alam nyo nagmamahal yung mga bilihin, no? Every time maririnig yung inflation, it has something to do with yung presyo in general, no? Presyo ng mga bilihin. And so when there is a stable inflation rate, you know that the economy and how the people are spending their money with the basic commodities. We're talking of basic commodities, by the way. Kaya nga kapag pinag-uusapan na natin yung presyo ng gasolina, presyo ng bigas, yan, ang unang pinakatatamaan dyan ay yung ating inflation rate talaga, because these are basic commodities that dictate how people are spending their money. And so when people can spend their money on a lot of things, you know that the inflation rate is stable. But when people and the value of their money, kaya lang nila mag-consume ng napakakonti, alam mo na, napakataas ng inflation rate. But right now, since we're talking of investments, you're going to look at inflation rate in a different perspective. Okay? Kasi the way we're going to compute for our rates of return has something to do with inflation. So ngayon, hindi na lang natin titignan yung inflation rate on how people spend their money or how much people can spend from their money. Okay? Noong 2018, I'm not sure if very much aware na kayo sa nangyayari sa paligid natin, but it was one of the worst years in terms of inflation dito sa Pilipinas. Kasi sa NCR, no, umabot siya ng 7%. Just imagine, if stability lang naman ng inflation rate ang pinag-uusapan natin, at least 3% sana, no? Pero umabot ng 7% yung interest rate, or sorry, umabot ng 7% yung inflation rate sa NCR. And look at Bicol region, umabot ng 9%. Okay? Just imagine. And also, this was also the time na sobrang controversial ng sili kasi umabot ng almost 1,000 pesos ang isang kilo ng sili. Kaya ang sabi nila, yes naman, mayaman ka na kasi meron ka ng meron kang plantation ng sili. Everything was affected because of this huge inflation rate. Aside from, syempre, napakahirap nga naman ng non-seasonal weather for Sealy. But yeah, I would always remember 2018 as that time na very controversial ang Sealy. But right now, as of speaking, we are on our first week of September 2020. So far, the latest bulletin was we had an average inflation of 2.5 inflation rate nung August 2020. So far ito na yung ating latest na bulletin. But really, what is it that how can inflation affect investments? Okay? So maliban sa dinidecrease niya yung value ng pera, dinidecrease niya yung spending ng pera, also inflation decreases the return of investments. Ulitin ko ho, ha? If we know inflation as this factor that decreases the value of money, it decreases the purchasing power of our money, but also, most importantly, it decreases the return. We're not talking of the value, we're not talking of the price, but it decreases the return of investments. That is why if you have foreign investors in your company, isa sa mga tinitignan talaga ng mga foreign investors ay yung inflation rate ng isang bansa. And kung tatanungin niyo po, ma'am, sino ba ang taga-manage, sino ba nag-oversee ng inflation rate ng isang bansa? Well, it's actually the job of the government. It's the job of the Bangko Sentral. It's in partnership with NEDA, in partnership with Department of Finance. So it's a cross-sectional job na ang trabaho talaga is to keep our inflation rate at a very stable rate, because kapag ka naging very unstable yung ating inflation, it's going to shoo or matuturn off yung mga investors sa bansa natin. Okay. So, we have an example here of annual rates of return. Now that I've explained how inflation affects the value or the return, now that I've explained how inflation rate decreases the rate of returns of investment, let's talk about real average annual returns, or we can call it as the real interest return. So when we say real, it's totoo, yung legit. Kasi yung nakikita nating nominal returns, yun yung nasa stated on the bank certificate, stated on your bond certificate, and in terms of securities, common shares or preferred shares, these are usually presented in the financial report of a particular listed company. At makikita mo yan dun sa kanyang ROE, yung return on equity niya on a yearly basis, or yung mga projections na tinatawag natin. So, pag sinabi nating nominal, these are just the stated rate of return. Okay? But if we take into consideration inflation rate, dun pa lang yung tinatawag nating real interest rate, because you are taking into consideration the effects of inflation. Okay? Because inflation, again, as I've mentioned earlier, it decreases the purchasing power of money. It decreases the value or the amount that a person can spend with his or her money. And so, ang tatandaan lang natin, when we are computing for the real interest rate, we are taking into consideration the effects of inflation rate. That's why the formula for getting the real average annual returns or the real interest rate is you subtract your inflation rate. So in this case, ang ating given, usually this is given naman dahil nga may bulletins naman from the Bangko Sentral. And aside from Bangko Sentral, nagpo-post din ng DTI, nagpo-post din ng PSA or ang Philippine Statistical Authority. And syempre, kailangan din siyang ipaskil sa lahat ng newspaper, sa lahat ng mga news agency, binabalita din yan on a regular basis. Kaya lahat ng tao are very aware of the current inflation rate of the country. So, like I said, you subtract your given inflation rate from your nominal average annual return. So, in this case, 16.9% less 3.1%, you will get 13.8%. And aside from that, no, kung makikita natin dito merong listahan, I'm sure by now you understand that every investment has different risks. Ibig sabihin, if you are a stable company, tong large company stock, this is an example of highly, kumbaga, they are very stable na in a sense na hindi na ganun ka high risk. Ibig sabihin, na sila, household selection. Kumbaga, common selection kasi nga, they've already proven so much. Ang dami ng pinagdaanan. Kaya, highly stable company. But for small company stocks, ito yung mga tinatawag na glamour stocks, no? Yung paano pa lang. Kumbaga, nagsisimula pa lang. At dahil nagsisimula pa lang, napakataas pa ng risk, pero napakalaki ng potential. Okay? And then we have bonds. Alam naman natin, kung makikita niyo yung nominal average annual returns, di hamak na kalahati lang siya as compared to the returns for shares. Okay? And then we have long-term government bonds, 5.8%. And then treasury bills, which we consider as basis for what we call the risk-free rate. So, pag sinabi nating risk-free rate, ito po yun, as compared to high-risk investments, ito na yung pinaka-sayad. Ibig sabihin, basis. Anything that goes lower than 3.8% is considered as, kumbaga para ka nang nagtapon ng opportunity. Ibig sabihin, kung mag-i-invest ka na rin naman, itodo mo na siya dun sa 3.8. Bakit itodo mo na sa 3.8? Because this is now considered as the risk-free rate. Ibig sabihin, wala ka ng kalugi. Pag nag-invest ka sa isang business na high risk, pero ang return niya ay 2.8%, lugi ka pa, no? Lugi ka ng 1%. So, you would rather choose the 3.8% rather than any investment that goes lower than 3.8% because this is already the basis of risk-free investment. Okay? Again, kung titignan natin, meron siyang pagkakasunod-sunod from the lowest to the highest nominal average annual returns. Now, ano naman yung risk premium? Now, risk premium is on top of the risk-free rate. Okay? This is the additional risk that you will be taking on top of the risk-free rate. So, ibig sabihin, if you are discounting the 3.8, you'd go for the higher risk. This is the amount that you will be getting. Kasi, ang equation natin dito is the nominal average annual returns less your risk-free rate. So, if you choose to get more returns for higher risk, then therefore, the risk premium is 13.1%. So, the higher the risk premium is, the higher the return that you would get. Okay? Kasi ito yung pinagpalit mo dun sa risk-free rate. So, kung titignan natin, the 16.9% minus 3.8%, you will get 13.1%. At kung mapapansin nyo dito, 0%. Kasi nga, 3.8% minus 3.8% is 0%, meaning wala kang additional risk. You have no additional risk. That's why 0%, meaning you are 100% safe. Walang additional risk. While here, you have an additional risk of 13% if you choose to invest in a 16.9% small company stock, 16.9% return through a small company stock. So now we have understood what real interest rate and what risk premium is all about. Real interest rate is your nominal annual return less your inflation rate. Okay? While risk premium is the additional risk you are willing to take on top of the risk-free rate that is available in the market. Again, the higher the risk premium is, the higher the return. All right, so far we've discussed about the real interest rate and the risk premium. So the next type of return that we would be discussing is what we call the holding period return. So this is only applicable for a single security. So whether it be a stock, a bond, whether it be in the property market or the real estate market, we're talking of just the value of your investment in a particular period. So in this case, we're talking of a 1-year holding period. So for example, you decided to invest your money in a stock. So you buy a particular stock at this point in time, and we know in the next coming year the price of that stock would be very volatile. So ang gusto mo lang malaman, nag-grow na ba yung value ng aking stock? So how would I know kung nag-grow na ba or hindi? So we're going to use this formula which signifies the movement or the price increase or decrease in your investment. So, holding period return, or in finance, we term it as K. For some books, they use R. But in this case, we're going to use K. So, K means return. Alright? Return, or kumbaga magkano na yung growth. Okay? Sabihin na lang natin growth in terms of return kasi hindi ka naman mag-i-invest kung wala kang growth na inaasahan. So, K is return. It is equal to your price last year. This is PT. There you go. I'm sorry. PT is your current price. That's the price today. Minus your price last year. Okay, so you will get the difference of these two. And then we're going to add the dividend that you receive. So this is applicable for bonds and stock. But this particular example, we're talking of a stock since we have a dividend right here. Yan. Over your price last year. No? Pagka nakita nyo yung T-1, it's always the previous price. Okay? Or we can use another equation, but you will get the same answer. No? Your price today, so PT, that is your current price, plus your dividend that you received today, over your price last year, minus 1. No? You will yield the same answer. Inano lang, work out lang yung equation, but definitely you will get the same answer. So, here's an example. Ano? Sabi niya, the stock price for stock A was 40 pesos per share a year ago. Presently, the stock is trading at 35 per share, and the shareholders just received a 10 peso dividend. What return was earned over the past year? Okay? So, magkano daw yung growth? This is the return that you earned from last year. You want to compare kung magkano na yung in-increase ng value ng investment mo dito sa stock A. So, with any math problems, ang lagi mong unang hanapin or ang una mong i-establish is yung mga given mo. You know that 40 pesos is the T minus 1. This is your price last year. And your T right now is 35 because this is the current trading price, no? Nakasulat presently. And you know that the dividend or yung D is 10 pesos. Now, what you have to do is to just simply insert all of the values in our formula. So, if you're using a calculator, manual calculator, walang problema. But if you are using Excel, mas madaling mag-compute kung Excel sheet ang gagamitin. So, I'm just gonna share with you how we're going to do that. So, ayan. Tatanggalin ko muna tong values natin. We're gonna substitute the values in our equation. So, T minus 1, this is our historical price. Ibig sabihin, price last year was 35. So, we're just gonna input 35. Your current price is, sorry. The stock price a year ago was 40. Your current price is 35. And your dividends, it is at 10 peso. So, kung dito ka sa Excel magsosolve ng problems, no, you just simply put the equal sign and then we input our equation. So, PT, which is current price, is 35 less your price last year, which is 40. Ayan, lagyan lang natin ng parentheses. So, plus your dividend, which is 10. But since meron tayong dito, divisor, we simply add our parentheses dito para hindi magkamali ng mechanism itong si Excel. So, dinoble ko lang yung parentheses, ano? And so, what happened? Divided by 2 tuloy. Bakit ba 2 yung sinulat ko dito? Okay, divided by your previous price. I'm so sorry. Okay, 40. Alright. Because that was your price last year. Yon, 12.5%. Okay? So, meaning, your investment grew to a 12.5%. So, from last year, taking into consideration the dividend that you receive, your investment's value or return grew to 12.5%. Kung titignan natin yung formula nitong return natin or holding period return, it's very similar to the formula of percent change because percent change is computed by getting the new price minus the old price divided by the old price. So, ito yung T minus 1. That's the T minus 1 and this is the current price or the new price. Kinonsider lang natin yung dividend na na-receive. But technically, dito lang din naman kinuha yung rationale behind the formula. So, here's another problem. So, the previous price was 89.5 and the new price is 110.25 and the dividend is 5. So, let's try to get the answer to this. So, we know that the new price, which is 110.25 minus 89.5 plus your dividend, close parenthesis, divided by the old price, which is 89.5, and enter. You will get 28.8% or close to 29%. So that's how you compute for the holding period return. So usually this is just for 1 year. Okay? So tandaan nyo, this is only applicable for a single security and you're going to compute for the 1-year holding period. So here's another new concept that we will be talking about. So I'm sure most of you first time yung ma-encounter itong tinatawag nating Fisher effect, or this concept is being practiced also in economics, or should I say it's also adopted in economics. And also, since we're talking of interest rates, it can also be adopted in finance. So basically, Fisher effect shows the relationship between nominal interest rate and real interest rate. Ginagamit itong equation na to if you would want to solve for the value of the nominal interest rate or the real interest rate using, and also including the effect of inflation rate. So as you can see, meron siyang formula na sinusundan. So 1 plus I is equal to 1 plus R multiplied by 1 plus PI. Okay? So sa maraming textbook sa finance, iba-iba lang yung mga symbolisms or yung mga how do I want to term this? Yung kanilang mga keywords, no? Or symbolism, but they mean the same. The formula is the same. Iba-iba lang yung pagkakatag, no? So, dito, may iba, ang tawag dito ay K. Dito naman, ang tawag dito is capital R. So, iba-iba, but they mean the same. So, for this particular slide, we will be adopting I and R. I is nominal rate and R means real interest rate. Okay? Kasi sa math of investment nyo, ginagamit nyo rin yung I. But for some textbook, K. No? Iba-iba. Like I said kanina, K means return dun sa holding period natin. So, it's just the same. Iba-iba lang yung ating ginagamit na symbolism. Okay? Paki-take note na lang po yun. So, for this example, no, I is the interest rate, para mas madaling tandaan. R is the real interest rate. And we know na kung paano kinukompute yung real interest rate, correct? Real interest rate is computed by getting the nominal interest rate less your inflation rate. Okay, so if you would work out this formula, okay, you will get this formula. Nominal interest rate is equal to 1 plus the real interest rate multiplied by 1 plus inflation rate minus 1. So, pag winwork out mo itong formula na to, you can get your nominal interest rate, you can get your real interest rate, and your inflation rate just by using the concept of algebra. So, there is a example here. We have problems, 3 problems. The first is you are going to compute for the real interest rate. The second problem is you are going to compute for the nominal interest rate. And the last is you can also look for the inflation rate or the risk, inflation risk premium. So just by using the Fisher effect concept, pwede nang masagot itong tatlong magkakaibang problem na ito. So how do we do that? Do that. Let's see. Okay. So ito, the problem is you're looking for the real interest rate. So babasahin ko lang, your time deposit is earning 7% as stated in your certificate of deposit. So sabi ko nga, if as stated, whatever is, kumbaga dun sa face amount ng certificate mo, whether it be sa bangko, whether it be sa bonds or sa stocks, usually nakasulat yung nominal interest rate. So, since stated siya sa certificate of deposit, you know that this is the nominal interest rate. And then, given yung ating current inflation, which is 2.5%, ang hinahanap natin is using the Fisher effect, what would be now the real interest rate of your investment? So, ang formula natin is 1 plus, so inano ko na, no? Inadd ko na. 1 plus your nominal interest rate is equal to your 1 plus, since ito yung ating missing ano, no? Ito yung hinahanap natin, tong 1 plus R na to. 1 plus your real interest rate multiplied by your 1 plus the inflation rate. Okay? So, baka tanongin nyo ako, ma'am, bakit 1.07? Kasi pag tinranslate mo yung 7%, that would be, move ka lang ng decimal place, it's going to be 1.07. Dalawang decimal place po yan, ano? And then, same with what happened here. So, mag-add ka lang ng 0 dito para mag-move ng dalawang decimal place. It's going to be 0.025. So, since 1 plus, in-add ko na, no? 1.025. So, using algebra operations, we would want 1 plus r to be transferred to our left. So, matitira siya dito kasi ito yung x natin. Kumbaga, this is the missing part of the equation. So, i-work out natin ito, ta-transfer natin tong 1.07 dun sa kabila. So, gagawin lang natin, i-divide natin yung 1.07 to 1.025 para mag-0 ito, di ba? Maglalagay ka lang dyan. Review na lang natin yung algebra natin, ano? So, basically, what's gonna happen is 1.07 divided by 1.025, you will get the answer 1.0439. Okay, so para matanggal itong 1 dito sa ating equation at may iwan itong r natin, you will simply subtract 1.0439 minus 1. Ayan. Pag ginawa natin yon, you will get the answer 0.0439. And since we're looking for a percent answer, we simply multiply that to 100% and you will get 4.39%. Ano po? So, ulitin ko lang, we used algebra to get the final answer on this problem. So, kung medyo nalilito pa po tayo doon, medyo reviewin po natin ulit yung ating algebra. Basic algebra lang naman to, no? Yung pag-work out ng equation, looking or solving for the x. So, yan po yun. Yung pinaka-hate nyo ng high school, we're gonna apply it right now dito sa ating subject. Okay? So, for the next problem, ang hahanapin naman natin is the nominal interest rate. So, ito naman yung x natin. This is the missing value that we're looking for. Now, so since ito, nandito na siya sa tamang side, we will just simply multiply these two. 1 plus your real interest rate multiplied by 1 plus your inflation rate. So, you will get 1.068. So, para matanggal yung 1 dito, we simply subtract. So, 1.068 minus 1, you will get 0.068. So, para maging percent siya, you just simply multiply that to 100, you will get 6.8%. Again, using the Fisher effect or the Fisher model, right? You can solve for your nominal interest rate. So, you got 6.8%. Now, for the third problem, we're looking for the inflation risk premium or the inflation rate. Again, using the same formula, i-apply lang natin yung methodology ng algebra. Again, just using the same concept, ililipat lang natin tong 1 plus I dito sa left side natin. You will get 1.06 divided by 1.038 para mawala yon. Okay, magwa 1 po siya dyan. Maiiwan po ito. Okay, you will get 1.0211 and then subtract 1 from that. You will get 0.211 and multiply that to 100%, you will get 2.11%. Okay? So that's how you use the Fisher effect to get your nominal interest rate, your real interest rate, and your inflation rate. Again, ginagamit itong formula na to if you want to look into the relationship of the real interest rate and nominal interest rate. Again, pag sinabi nating real interest rate, we are taking into consideration inflation. Okay? Next is we have the expected return. Okay. Pag sinabi nating expected return, this is just setting the expectations of the investors. Because we know that yung tinatawag nating nominal returns o di kaya naman yung predicted na these are just forecast. And when you do forecast, you have to have your contingency plan. And when you say contingency plan, you have a plan A, plan B, plan C, or plan D. What happens kung magkaroon ng recession? What happens kung we have a minimal growth in the economy? What happens now if, let's just say, there would be a high growth in the market? So we're talking of systematic risk. Okay? Because pag systematic risk, whether you like it or not, it's gonna happen. And so expected return actually takes into consideration the systematic risk. We know systematic risk cannot be controlled. Anong example niyan? We have the changes in GDP. We have political risks, just like what's happening in the US right now. No, they're having their election. That's why very unstable yung kanilang economy. And so with systematic risk, you are putting into consideration the uncertainties in the market as a whole. And so when we compute for the expected return, we are actually also computing for the uncertainties in the market. Okay? The formula for expected return, I know it's nakakakita kayo ng mga hindi nyo masyadong kumbaga we're not really comfortable looking at complicated equations, but really this is not a complicated equation. Simple lang siya, mukha lang mahirap. Okay? Pakalmahin mo yung sarili mo at pilitin mong tignan yung screen, huwag kang kukurap kasi baka if may ma-miss ka na discussion dito, hindi mo na masundan. Okay? So, again, meron tayong formula. And so, what we want to do is to identify what's inside the formula. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin? Anong values yung binubuo ng formula na to? Okay. Pag sinabi natin K, again, return. Sabi ko nga kanina, sometimes I, yung nakasulat dito, sometimes K, sometimes R, but they all mean the same. Okay? Again, expected return, ang kanyang symbolism is like a K with a straight bar on top of it. So parang kumbaga mean, 'di ba? Ang symbolism ng mean is X tapos merong bar dito sa taas, ano? So this is the symbolism of expected return. But for some formula, instead of K, R, no? So para parehas lang, wag po kayo malilito diyan. Okay? So, expected return is the summation of your return state I. Okay? Mamaya malalaman nyo kung ano yung return. But this is in a percentage. It's in a form of a percentage. Meaning, this would be the probable return for this certain scenario. Okay? State meaning scenario. This would be the probable return for this scenario. P means probability. Ibig sabihin, ilang percent yung chances na pwede siyang mangyari. If I'm gonna ask you, last year, 2019, Sino bang mag-aakala na 2020 magkakaroon tayo ng recession? So, kung nag-forecast ka last year, the probability of getting a recession is only 10%. Kasi wala naman nag-expect eh. Okay? Ibig sabihin, dun pa lang sa forecast na yon, mali ka na. Kaya kailangan mo magkaroon ng panibagong forecast kasi right now, we are in a pandemic. But kung 2019 ang pag-uusapan, yung chances of getting a pandemic is very minimal. Okay? Pero kung probability of growth for 2020, nako, walang-wala, ano? Baka 5% lang yung probability ng growth. Kasi right now, ang aim natin is survival. But, the probability of this scenario to happen, ito, probability of K occurring, ito yung in a percent din, no? Ilang percent yung chance na mangyari siya. And N means number of possible scenarios. So, kung meron kang aggressive growth, medium growth, minimal growth, recession. So, these are scenarios. Okay? So, ganito ang itsura niya. So, this is the state of economy, this is the probability, and this is the return. So, I'm gonna explain it to you one by one. So, magsimula tayo dito sa high growth muna. High growth. Doon tayo sa positive muna. The chances of having a high growth for this particular scenario is 30%. Okay? So, kapag mataas yung growth sa isang scenario, let's say, mataas yung growth for this year, ibig sabihin, very prosperous itong taon na to, the probability of that happening is 30%. And when it happens, the return that you will get from your investment would be 20%. Okay? Dahil very optimistic, high growth, yung scenario, the chances of it of happening is 30%. When it happens, you will get a maximum of 20%. But how about moderate growth? Kung mapapansin nyo, ang pinakamalaking probability dito is this portion right here. The chances of getting a moderate growth is 40%. And when it does, okay, you will get at least 10% return from your investment. Okay? But how about zero growth? Ibig sabihin, kung ano yung value niya last year, ganun pa rin yung value niya today. So, zero growth meaning walang loss, wala ring earnings. Zero nga eh. So, 20% yung chances na mangyari siya, and when it does, you will only get 5%. But how about an economic downturn? For another terminology for this is a recession. So, the probability of having a recession is 10%. And if in case magkaroon ng recession, instead of growth, excuse me. So, instead of growth, you will be having a negative return. So, posible yan talaga pagka merong recession. Just like right now, walang growth yung ating mga investment kasi talaga, we are in a recession. Alam mo na yan. Walang profit or walang kita ngayon masyado kasi nga lahat nagtitipid, ayaw masyadong gumastos, hindi masyadong nag-i-invest. So, negative 5%. So, how do we apply the formula with this given example? Okay? So, I'm just gonna share with you kung paano ko siya ginawa sa Excel sheet. Ayan. So, given that scenario, ayan, ginawa ko na siya dito. Ano? For you to get your expected return, so sulat natin dito, no, K. Kasi yan yung ibig sabihin ng expected return. Tapos, lagyan natin siya ng bar sa taas. Ayan, insert. Ayun, meron na siyang bar sa taas. Okay. Ito yung ating hinahanap, expected return. So, ang formula lang niya, summation. Ang ibig sabihin kasi nung formula na, ang ibig sabihin kasi nung symbol na, ito, pakita ko na lang. Ayan, yan, nakikita nyo, no? Ito, ang ibig niyang sabihin rito, ayan. So, summation. Ano bang ibig sabihin? I-add mo lang. So, there's nothing complicated with the symbol summation. Okay. So, pakita lang natin, ano? You simply multiply the probability with the return. No, kung kanina sinabi ko nga, the chances of getting a recession is 10%, and if it happens, the return that you would be getting is a negative 5%. So, multiply lang natin, equal sign, 10% multiplied by negative 5%. Okay. So, close parenthesis, enter. So, i-drag lang natin yung ating formula. Automatic na yan. And, isa-sum lang natin, i-add natin, you will get 10.5%. And so, given this 1, 2, 3, 4 scenarios, you know that the expected return is 10.5%, average of 10.5% given all of this scenario. Okay? Kanina, sabi natin, pag zero growth, big sabihin yung chance na walang growth, walang pagbabago dun sa investment mo last year is 20%, ang return mo lang sa investment mo is 5%. But, ito yung sinasabi natin kanina, what if moderate growth? 40%. You will be only receiving 10% of return from your investment. So, in short, with all these possibilities that's gonna happen, you incorporated all of these possibilities, and yet, you know that the expected return will still range from 10.5%. Ngayon, ma'am, para saan ba yan? Let's say, for example, this stock is a stock of, sige, sabihin na natin Globe Telecom. Si Globe Telecom, you are expecting at least 10%, no? 10%. Yan. You're expecting 10%. Because nag-invest ka kasi alam mo makaka-earn ka ng 10%. Now, what happens kapag bumaba pa yan sa 10%? Okay, diyan ka na mag-start magtanong kung what happened. Ibig sabihin, ganun siya ka-volatile sa changes ng yung tinatawag nating systematic risk. Kasi ito, in-incorporate na natin yung systematic risk, and yet we've projected na 10.5% yung pwede mong makuha. Ngayon, kung ang actual na na-receive mo, kinumpute mo yung holding period mo, after 1 year, ang nakuha mo lang is 8% or 7%, you know that the investment is not doing well. Because your forecast is really below what you expected. Kaya nga, nag-i-expect ka eh. Diba? You've taken into consideration all of these things, and yet, you got a 7%. Ibig sabihin, ito yung pang-set mo ng standard. This is your expectation versus reality. So, if your expectation is 10.5% and the reality is 7%, napakalayo nung tinatawag nating discrepancy. So, ibig sabihin, you have a basis whether a particular stock is doing well or not. Okay? Kasi you've already set your expectations. And by the way, all of these things are done by yung mga nagfo-forecast. Trabaho din po yan ng mga financial analysts. They do all of the forecasting. Okay? Next, so here's another example. Compute lang natin. Same formula. You just simply multiply your probability to your return. Probable return. Okay. Drag lang natin. And then simply get the total. So, that's 1.2%. Kasi ito, sinulat ko dito for 2020. Ano? Kung makikita nyo yung economic recession, napakataas as compared to the 10%. The zero growth is also 30%, moderate growth is also 30%, and high growth, dahil mahinang malabong mangyari yung high growth sa taon na to, ginawa ko lang siyang, excuse me, 10%. And so, kahit na napakataas, kung makikita niyo yung return, no? If zero growth, ang return niya is 6%, moderate growth is 9%, high growth is 12%, and yet, yung lumitaw na expected return, ang lumitaw 1.2%. Kasi nga recession talaga tayo ngayon. Okay, nakita nyo ba yung difference? Ito 10.5, this one is only 1.2% given this scenario. Well, how about this one? This is projected return for 2021. So, sabihin na nating magkaroon ng konting growth. So, nandun sa 60% yung moderate growth. So, let's see. Let's compute. So, this one is 15%. Meron pa rin chance na may recession, ano? Ayan. Malaki-laki pa rin naman, 15%. Multiplied by that. Okay. Drag. And get the sum. Okay. Okay, so 8%. Or, yan, naka-round off lang po siya, no? Pinindot ko lang po ito para makita natin yung exact number niya by 2 digits. Okay? So, ayan, malinaw po. Ang answer natin dito on a regular economic condition, you will get 10.5%. Okay? Nagkaroon ng recession. On a recession, your investment can only earn as much as 1.2%. And kapag naka-recover na, hindi pa naman siya agad 10.5. So, on the recovering side, you can at least get 7.55%. So, that's how you use yung tinatawag nating expected return. Now that we understand what expected return is all about, it's just simply getting the probability that a certain return can really be achieved at a particular scenario in an economy. Because sa totoo lang, sa loob ng isang taon, there are so many possibilities in terms of an economic cycle. In a year, hindi mo alam kung meron ba talagang progressive growth. You don't know if there would be a stagnant na return, as in zero growth talaga, or you don't know kung magkakaroon ng economic recession, just like what's happening right now. Last year, nobody predicted that this recession can happen. And so, expected return is making a conservative estimate of expectations when it comes to your possible returns from your investment. But with standard deviation, it's more on the kumbaga conservative na nga yung expected return this time. You are taking into consideration what we call the volatility of that expectation. And so when we say volatility is it's the change. So sabi ko nga kanina, if you set your expectation and the possibility that that expectation can change is what we call a deviation. Ibig sabihin may pagbabago. In finance, when we say mataas ang standard deviation, it means the investment is very risky. And so, when we say deviation, we're talking of dispersion. Pag sinabi mo kasing dispersion, it's the scattering eh. So, if you set your standard at this point, at which range can that standard deviate? Or kumbaga yung range ng pagbabago from that certain point, gaano ba kalaki yung distansya or gaano kalaki yung gap from that particular standard that you set. Okay? So again, if you have now an idea on how to compute for the expected return, hindi na kayo magugulat masyado dito sa formula ng standard deviation. Pero tignan muna natin yung second definition. Sabi, a volatile stock has a high standard deviation. Like I said kanina, in finance, when you have a higher volatility of any kind of investment, you know it's very high risk. So, while the deviation of a stable blue chip stock is usually rather low. So, when we say blue chip stock, these are highly established corporations. Unlike yung mga nagsisimula pa lang, yung mga growth stock, they are very high risk. That's why napakataas ng kanilang volatility. Mga blue chip stocks, they are highly established stocks. That's why they have low volatility. But then, of course, they are relatively risky pa rin. Pero in terms of volatility, napakababa na. Okay, so the formula for standard deviation is, may makikita kayo dito na symbolism. In a Greek symbol, it means sigma. Kaya kung napapansin nyo dun sa inyong calculator, merong nakasulat dyan na SD. It means the same, no? Sigma and SD and standard deviation, they mean the same. So, nadiderive yan using the square root of the summation of your nominal returns less your expected return, no? Merong bar sa taas, meaning expected return yon, squared. Okay? Ibig sabihin, you're gonna get the difference of these two, and then you're gonna square your answer multiplied by the probability. Okay? Again, standard deviation measures the dispersion of returns. This is an adopted formula from statistics. So, ina-apply lang natin siya dito sa finance because we want to measure the dispersion. Sa statistics kasi basta dispersion of answers ang pinag-uusapan, standard deviation lang ang formula na applicable. So, let's do it using an Excel sheet. So, same problem po tayo kanina, no? I just adopted the same problem. So, i-adopt natin ngayon using the formula of standard deviation. So, kunin lang natin yung formula. Okay, equal sign, and then we get the return, which is negative 5% in this case, minus our expected rate of return na na-compute, which is 10.5. Okay. So, dito sa Excel, para hindi nagmo-move yung ating cell na pinagkokopyahan, we simply put the dollar sign. So, hindi na siya gagalaw dyan sa 10.5 kahit drag pa natin yung pababa. And then, square natin siya using this symbol. Okay, number 6 po yan sa inyong keypad. Raised to 2. Okay, doblehin lang natin yung ating parenthesis para hindi magkamali yung ating formula. And then, multiplied. Okay, multiplied by the probability, which is 10%. Okay, I think napasobra yata ako ng parenthesis. Ayan. Ayun. Kinorek naman niya, no? Ayaw na niya tanggapin yung extrang parenthesis doon. Parehas lang daw. Okay, there you go. And then we drag it para makuha natin yung total or sum. Okay, 0.57. Now, hindi pa dyan natatapos yung ating formula. We have to get the square root of our answer here to get our standard deviation. So, simply, we input square root. Okay, open parenthesis. Input the cell, close parenthesis, and you will get the answer of 7.6%. Okay. To make sense of this answer, let's compute for the other scenarios na previously nating diniscuss kanina. So, again, input lang natin yung ating formula. Equal sign. Okay. This is our return. Right? Minus our expected return. Again, lagyan lang natin ng dollar sign. Okay. Raised to 2. Dagdagan natin pala, nakalimutan ko na naman itong parenthesis. Ayan. Multiplied by our probability, which is 30%. Okay? Drag lang natin yan. Alright. And then, kunin natin yung sum. And then, from there, kunin natin yung square root. Remember? Oh, wala. Okay. Then, we get, finally, oh, naghang. Okay. Equal sign, get the square root, open parenthesis, pindutin ang number, voila. And, okay, ano lang natin, percent. Automatic na po yan, magpo-percent. Yun, 11%. Okay? Kung gusto natin gawing percent yan, walang problema. Ayan, oh. Okay. Siyempre, pakita natin yung ating complete answer if you want. Increase natin yung ating decimal place. Ayan, para mas makita ninyo. So, 11%. Bold natin yung answer natin. So, we know. And then, another scenario. So, just so we can make a comparison. Okay, equal sign. Again, doblehin na natin. KI, return. Minus our expected return. Again, lagyan ng dollar sign para hindi mag-move. Okay. Raised to 2. Multiplied by your probability. Enter. Right. And then drag. Okay. After i-drag, kunin ang sum. And then after kunin ang sum, kunin ang square root. Okay, copy lang natin yung ating symbol dito na sigma. Equals square root. Ayan. Enter. Tapos gawin natin percent. Right. Extend the decimal place to decimal places. So the answer is 6.99% or 7%. Okay. Now, how do we make sense of our answer dito sa standard deviation? Okay. Remember, kanina ang ating rule, the higher the standard deviation is, the riskier the investment is. So, dito sa ating regular economic environment, kasi ito yung usual state of the economy, right? Yung moderate growth is 40%, high growth is 30%, recession is only 10%, no? So this is the regular state of the economy. You will get 7.6%. But as you can see, dito sa ating scenario number 2, which is a recession, mas mataas yung standard deviation, which is 11%. Okay? But here, pagka nagkaroon na ng tinatawag nating makakabalik na recovery for the economy, you will get 6.99 or sabihin na nating 7%. So, meaning, true enough, we got a highest standard deviation dito sa under economic recession, which is 11%. So, that's how we make comparison of computed standard deviation. True enough, the highest computed standard deviation would be the riskiest option or projection. We've talked about expected return, and then from there we went to the standard deviation. Now for the last part of this computation is this is like the how we seal the deal. Okay? Kumbaga, ito yung last na magsasabing ito na yung pinakatotoong sagot. Okay? Ito na yung pinaka-bottom line ng dami ng ginawa natin magmula kanina. We call it the coefficient of variance or the CV. Okay? The CV is, if you are an investor and you would want to know the risk return relationship of an investment, you would be focusing on the CV more than the standard deviation. Because more than the standard deviation, the CV is measuring the deviation or the distribution or the variance of the mean from the distribution of the standard deviation. Imaginein mo yun. Kung yung standard deviation, tinignan yung dispersion from the expected returns. Now, coefficient of variance is also measuring the dispersion from the mean of the distribution as computed by the standard deviation. Kumbaga, it's kung yung expected return is a conservative estimate, the standard deviation is a conservative estimate, but all the more, coefficient of variance measures the volatility. Kasi pag sinabi mong dispersion, it's really volatility yung changes na nangyayari dun sa return nung investment mo. Okay, sa madaling salita, this is the most significant measurement of volatility. More than the standard deviation, coefficient of variance is the ultimate measurement of volatility. So just like the standard deviation, the higher the coefficient of variance is, the riskier the investment is. So kung mas mababa yung CV na makompute mo, ibig sabihin this is a safe investment. So balikan natin yung kinompute natin kanina dito sa Excel. No, napakasimple lang naman ng formula ng CV or coefficient of variance. It's your standard deviation divided by your expected return. So if para mas maganda yung kalabasan ng ating result, tanggalin natin sa pagkaka-percent yung ating answer. Ayan. But it's just the same, Nagawin ko lang siyang not in percent form. Anyway, sige. So, simply, CV is your equal sign. Do not forget your standard deviation divided by your expected return. Yeah. Okay, the answer is 0.72. Here in this scenario, the recession scenario, okay, just to prove the point, there you go, equals 8.96. And last scenario, the recovery scenario, 0.93. Okay, as you can see, napakalayo ng difference ng CV ng scenario 2, which is 8.96. That's ang taas ng gap, That's a huge gap. 0.72, hindi masyado nagkakalayo dito sa 0.93. Again, these numbers measures the dispersion o yung layo. Okay? Yung layo ng change dun sa standard na siniset mo, which is yung expected return. So there you go. That's how you use expected return, standard deviation, and coefficient of variance in terms of measuring the volatility of the risk or the volatility of the return that you actually project. So ito yon, yung expected return. So this signifies the volatility of this particular return.